I was expecting to be jailed this week, but my lawyers really put up a great fight. But I have no doubt that it's a question of time, whether it's on Monday or some other day next week. I'm convinced they're going to put me in jail because every day I have more cases registered against me. Now I think I've broken a world record that I have now 180 cases and increasing by the day. And unfortunately, there's right now we are facing law of the jungle. This is unprecedented. That not just that there are 180 cases against me, but most of my senior leadership is in jail. The only way they can come out is if they renounce that they're part of my party. That's the only way they come out. And almost 10,000 workers of mine are in jail right now, going through the worst sort of situation. People who are my ticket holders, who have given tickets to contest the elections, they are being forced to leave my party. Otherwise, their houses are broken in. I mean, this is all common knowledge. It's been going on for over a month. Their houses get broken in. Their families are, and they are all in hiding. So their relatives are picked up. Young boys have been picked up. Their women. So we are facing the worst sort of persecution. It's never been done. This sort of thing has never been done in Pakistan to political workers. So it's a matter of time. I expect maybe Monday, maybe a few days later, but I don't see being out of jail for long. Well, definitely our ex-army chief, he engineered the whole thing. He used the intelligence agencies to break my party members and also our allies. So it was a coalition government. And this is at a time when our government economically was performing the best any government has performed in the past 17 years. And this is despite 2 years of COVID-19. And when our government was considered internationally to be the top 3 governments that coped the best with the COVID-19 pandemic. So he engineered the whole thing to get an extension. And he then joined hands with the current prime minister, who was facing corruption cases. He was under trial at the time, and they engineered this thing. And where did the US come in? They fed the US this bit that I was anti-American. I'm talking about the army chief. He actually had a lobbyist who was paid by my government without my knowledge, who was lobbying in the US to say how anti-American Imran Khan was and how pro-American the army chief was. So yes, there was the US interference came in when their Undersecretary of State spoke to Ambassador 6th March 22. And the ambassador then sends me the cipher, which says that ambassador sends me the cipher, which says that unless the Prime Minister Imran Khan is removed in a vote of no confidence, there would be consequences for Pakistan. And then the vote of no confidence was tabled the next day. And then within weeks, my government left. But we now realize that it was engineered by our army chief rather than engineered from Washington. But that's what we think. Well, look, let me first clarify what my position on foreign policy is. Look, Pakistan's foreign policy must be for the people of Pakistan. And why? Because 100 million Pakistanis are vulnerable, 50 million below the poverty line, and 50 million just above it. So when I came to power, I specifically spoke about how we were going to try and lift our people out of poverty. Now, in doing so, you have to have a foreign policy that is basically non-aligned, like India. Now, India, for instance, they trade with China. They bought Russian oil at discounted price, yet they are partners with the US, one of the most strategic partnerships they have in the Quad with the US. Because India, their governments are concerned about the vast number of poor people in India, the level of poverty. Same is the case with Pakistan. So my idea was not to be anti any government. My idea was that my concern, the people elected me to help them get out of poverty. Now, we were involved in two conflicts. We joined the US jihad, the Afghan jihad against the Soviets in the 80s. And then after 9/11, we again joined the US war on terror. Both these conflicts took a heavy toll on Pakistan. The 80s one left 5 million refugees in Pakistan, Kalashnikovs, drugs flowing in, militant groups. And we suffered from all that, the consequences. Then after 9/11, we joined the US war on terror. 80,000 Pakistanis died. They were killed in that war. And then over $100 billion were lost to the economy. So if my concern are the 100 million vulnerable people of Pakistan, then the best way is to stay out of conflicts. Be partners in peace. We played our part in trying to get the Taliban and the US across the table. And we were responsible. Pakistan, my government was responsible in the Doha talks. But to be part of any conflicts, I think we just cannot afford it. So more like the Indian foreign policy. I think the whole Afghan war was a mistake. You know, if you know the history of Afghanistan, they do not accept foreign invaders. Whether it was a superpower, Britain in the 19th century, or the Soviets in the 20th century, or the US going into Afghanistan. If the target was Osama bin Laden, then after Osama bin Laden was taken out, they should have left. Or if it was, I never understood the aims of the Afghan venture by the US. I never understood that. What did they want to achieve from it? If it was to install democracy there, well, it wasn't going to happen through the barrel of a gun. If it was to liberate the Afghan women, never in human history has another country come to liberate someone's women. So if it was just, from what I could understand, it was to Osama bin Laden was the terrorist. And they thought that Taliban were harboring him. So when the Taliban government was removed, they should have left. Because the longer they stayed, the more the resistance started building up. Because it's in the Afghan nature to resist foreigners. It's their history. So, and yet there was no clear aim. What was victory going to be in Afghanistan? So to answer your question, in the end, I didn't think Joe Biden had much option left. I mean, they had to withdraw from Afghanistan sometime or the other. The only problem was the way the withdrawal took place. Now, I again don't blame Joe Biden because he wasn't supposed to know that Ashraf Ghani would take off in the middle of the night. The president would leave the country. And the moment he left the country, the whole Afghan army collapsed. By the way, Afghan army was already collapsing. So no one was expected to, Biden wasn't expected to know that there were 300,000 Afghan army would just collapse and that the president would take off. Because all of us, we sitting in Pakistan thought there would be a civil war. There would be, 300,000 Afghan army it would take a long time. When I met President Trump, this was almost 2 years before what happened in Kabul. President Trump thought that the Afghan government would last 6 months after the withdrawal, but no one expected that the way it collapsed. And so because it collapsed in the way it did, the whole withdrawal became chaotic and no one was expecting it. And then the airport scenes. And I think President Biden actually got a lot of flack, but if that had happened 2 years later, for instance, if 2 years later they had withdrawn, and if the president had fled, as Ashraf Ghani did, the same thing would have happened 2 years later. So I think, he couldn't have predicted the collapse of the Afghan army and the president leaving the country.